There's a single mental technique that separates geniuses from ordinary thinkers. That makes some people impossible to fool, while others believe obvious lies. That allows certain individuals to see through every manipulation, while the masses fall for propaganda designed for children. Francis Bacon discovered this technique 400 years ago. He used it to revolutionize human thought, to become one of history's most influential minds, to see reality with clarity that made him impossible to control through the normal methods that work on everyone else. And here's what's shocking. This technique isn't complicated. It doesn't require high intelligence or special education. It's not some mystical practice or advanced training. It's a simple shift in how you process information, a fundamental change in how your brain engages with reality. One adjustment that, once made, multiplies your effective intelligence exponentially, makes you see things others miss, protects you from manipulation that controls everyone around you, and transforms how you think about everything. But there's a cost. Once you make this shift, once you start using this technique consistently, you can't go back. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't return to the comfortable ignorance you had before. You become isolated from people who haven't made the shift because you're operating at a different level of cognition. You see through things they take seriously. You question things they accept. You think in ways they find uncomfortable or threatening. This brain hack makes you smarter and freer, but it also makes you alien to the world of ordinary thinking. So what is this technique? What's the brain hack Francis Bacon discovered that changed everything? It's deceptively simple. It's this. Treat every belief, including your own, as a hypothesis to be tested rather than a truth to be defended. That's it. That's the entire technique. But understanding why this simple shift multiplies intelligence and makes you immune to control requires going deeper. Let's start with how most people's brains actually work. Most people collect beliefs. They hear things from parents, teachers, media, culture, friends. They absorb these beliefs, often without conscious evaluation. And once a belief is absorbed, it becomes part of their identity, part of their understanding of reality. And because it's now part of them, their brain's job becomes defending it, not evaluating it, not testing it, defending it. This is what Bacon called idols of the mind, mental errors that systematically corrupt thinking. Most people are not thinking. They're defending pre-existing beliefs against any information that threatens them. Their intelligence, however high, gets channeled into rationalization rather than reasoning. They become sophisticated at creating arguments for what they already believe rather than capable of evaluating whether what they believe is actually true. This makes them controllable. Because if you know what someone believes, if you know what identities they're attached to, you can manipulate them by appealing to those beliefs and identities. You frame things in ways that confirm what they already think. You trigger emotional attachment to beliefs they hold. You make them feel that questioning would be betrayal of who they are, and they fall for it every time. Because they're not using their intelligence to evaluate, they're using it to defend. But here's what happens when you make Bacon's shift. When you start treating your own beliefs as hypotheses rather than truths. Suddenly, your brain is no longer in defense mode. It's in evaluation mode. You're not trying to prove your beliefs are right. You're trying to determine if they're actually supported by evidence. You're not defending your positions. You're testing them. And this changes everything. First, it makes you exponentially smarter, not because you gain new information, but because you're finally using your intelligence for its actual purpose, thinking, rather than rationalizing. You're applying cognitive power to evaluating reality rather than defending comfortable conclusions. This is like removing a governor from an engine. Your brain was always capable of this level of cognition, but it was constrained by the need to defend pre-existing beliefs. Remove that constraint and suddenly you're operating at full capacity. Second, it makes you impossible to manipulate through normal means, because manipulation works by triggering defense of existing beliefs, by making you feel your identity is threatened, by appealing to what you already think you know. But if you're treating everything as hypothesis, if nothing is sacred or beyond question, these triggers don't work. You don't defend beliefs because you're not attached to them as truths. You evaluate claims regardless of whether they confirm or threaten your current thinking. You can't be manipulated through appeals to beliefs you hold provisionally. Let's break down how to actually implement this technique, because knowing about it intellectually isn't the same as using it. Most people hear this idea and think they're already doing it. They're not. Their brain is still in defense mode for most beliefs, especially core ones. So here's the process Bacon developed for actually making the shift. Start by identifying your core beliefs, the things you're most certain about, the views you defend most strongly, the positions that feel like part of your identity. Write them down. Be honest. These are your most sacred beliefs, the ones that feel obvious and unquestionable. And here's the critical step. For each one, ask yourself, what evidence would prove this wrong? This is the test. If you can't think of any evidence that would change your mind, if there's literally nothing that could make you question the belief, then it's not a hypothesis. It's dogma. It's faith. It's identity. And your brain is defending it, not evaluating it. You're not thinking about this topic. You're protecting it from thought. Bacon insisted that every real hypothesis must be falsifiable, must have conditions under which you'd recognize it as false. If you can't specify what would prove you wrong, you're not thinking scientifically. You're believing. And belief is the enemy of clear thought. Belief makes you controllable. Hypothesis keeps you free. So you take each core belief and force yourself to articulate what would falsify it. This is painful. Your brain resists. It feels wrong. It feels like betraying something important. But push through. Write down concrete evidence or observations that, if true, would require you to change your position. This alone starts the shift, because you're admitting, even just to yourself, that your belief might be wrong, that it's provisional, that it's subject to evidence rather than protected from it. Now here's where it gets powerful. Once you've identified what would falsify your beliefs, you actively look for that evidence. You don't avoid it. You don't dismiss it before examining it. You seek it out. You expose yourself to the strongest arguments against your position. You try to find information that would prove you wrong. This is completely opposite to how most people operate. They avoid contradicting information. They surround themselves with confirming sources. They protect their beliefs from challenge. But Bacon insisted on the opposite, that the only way to know if a belief is actually justified is to expose it to the strongest possible challenges and see if it survives. If it doesn't survive, good. You've learned something. You've corrected an error. You're now closer to truth than you were. If it does survive, better. Now you know your belief can withstand serious challenge. It's not just something you absorbed. It's something that's been tested. This process makes you smarter in multiple ways. First, you're constantly updating your understanding based on new evidence. You're not stuck with beliefs you formed years ago based on limited information. You're continuously improving your model of reality by testing it against new data and correcting errors. This is how you become wiser over time rather than just older. Second, you develop deep understanding of topics because you're not just learning your position. You're learning the strongest counter-arguments. You're understanding multiple perspectives. You're seeing the complexity rather than accepting simplified narratives. This makes you harder to fool because you can spot when someone's giving you a one-sided story. You know what they're not telling you because you've studied what challenges their position. Third, you become comfortable with uncertainty. Most people need certainty, need to feel they know, need to have answers. This need makes them vulnerable to anyone offering certainty, even false certainty. But when you treat beliefs as hypotheses, uncertainty is natural, expected, honest. You can say, "I don't know," without feeling ignorant. You can hold provisional positions without feeling insecure. And this comfort with uncertainty makes you immune to manipulation through false certainty. Now let's talk about why this makes you impossible to control. Every form of manipulation relies on one of a few mechanisms: triggering existing beliefs, creating emotional reactions that bypass reason, exploiting cognitive biases, creating false certainty, using social proof and authority. Bacon's technique protects against all of these. Triggering existing beliefs doesn't work if you don't hold beliefs defensively. Someone tries to manipulate you by appealing to your political views, your religious convictions, your cultural assumptions. But if those are held as hypotheses rather than identities, the appeal doesn't trigger defense. You evaluate the claim on its merits rather than accepting it because it confirms what you already think. Creating emotional reactions is harder when you're in evaluation mode. Not impossible. Emotions still happen. But you recognize them as information about your psychology, not information about reality. When something makes you angry or afraid or excited, instead of letting that emotion drive your thinking, you note it and then examine whether the thing triggering the emotion is actually true. Emotion becomes data about your reaction rather than guide for your conclusion. Cognitive biases are reduced, not eliminated, when you're actively looking for them. You know you have confirmation bias, so you deliberately seek disconfirming evidence. You know you have motivated reasoning, so you question conclusions that feel too convenient. You know you're subject to social proof, so you force yourself to evaluate claims independently of how many people believe them. You can't eliminate bias completely, but conscious attention to bias reduces its control dramatically. False certainty doesn't work because you're not seeking certainty. You're seeking accuracy. Someone offers you a simple, certain answer to a complex question. Most people grab it gratefully. Finally, certainty. But you're suspicious of certainty. Complex questions rarely have simple answers. So claimed certainty makes you question more, not less. You're looking for the nuance and complexity that simple certainty ignores. And this makes you immune to propaganda that relies on offering false certainty. Social proof and authority have less power because you evaluate claims independently. Most people believe things because authorities say them or because everyone else believes them. But if you're treating claims as hypotheses, it doesn't matter who says them or how many people believe them. What matters is evidence. Is it true? Is it supported? Can it be tested? Authority and consensus might be weak signals worth noting, but they're never sufficient to establish belief. This makes you much harder to control through manipulation of authority or manufactured consensus. Here's where the technique becomes revolutionary. Once you start operating this way consistently, you begin to see patterns others miss. You notice when media is manipulating through emotional framing. You spot propaganda that others accept as news. You recognize when politicians are exploiting cognitive biases. You see through marketing that controls everyone around you. Not because you're smarter in IQ terms, but because you're using your intelligence for evaluation rather than defense. And evaluation sees what defense is blind to. Bacon used this to see through the accepted authorities of his time. Everyone believed Aristotle, accepted ancient wisdom, trusted tradition, but Bacon questioned all of it, tested it, and discovered that much of what everyone knew was wrong. He wasn't smarter than everyone else. He was just willing to question what they defended, and that willingness revealed errors that transformed human understanding of reality. You can do the same. Start questioning things everyone around you accepts, not reflexively, not cynically, but genuinely. Ask, is this actually true? How do we know? What evidence supports it? What evidence contradicts it? Am I believing this because it's supported or because everyone believes it? Most of what society accepts is true, but some isn't. And you won't know which is which unless you actually test instead of just accepting. Now let's discuss why most people will never make this shift. Why Bacon's technique, despite being simple and powerful, remains rare. Because it requires something most people aren't willing to give up: the comfort of certainty. The security of knowing, the social belonging that comes from sharing unquestioned beliefs with your tribe. When you treat beliefs as hypotheses, you give up false certainty. You have to live with, I think this is probably true based on current evidence, but I could be wrong. That's uncomfortable. Humans want to know, want to be certain, want to feel they understand. Living in provisional understanding, always open to being wrong, that creates anxiety most people can't tolerate. You also give up tribal belonging. Every tribe, every social group has shared beliefs that define membership. Political tribes, religious tribes, cultural tribes, professional tribes. If you start actually questioning the shared beliefs, you're no longer fully part of the tribe. You're suspect. You're other. You're threatening because your questions imply the tribe might be wrong. Most people need tribal belonging more than they need truth. So they don't question. They defend. They stay comfortable and connected rather than becoming accurate and isolated. And you give up your current identity. Many people define themselves by their beliefs. I'm a political affiliation. I'm a religion. I'm a ideology. If those beliefs become provisional hypotheses, what are you? Who are you, if not your beliefs? This existential question is too uncomfortable for most people, so they keep beliefs as identity. Stay certain of who they are, and never develop the cognitive freedom that comes from treating beliefs as tools rather than essence. Bacon paid these costs. He was isolated from peers who found his questioning threatening. He was attacked by those defending traditional beliefs. He was seen as dangerous because he was willing to overturn accepted wisdom. But he gained something more valuable than comfort or belonging. He gained clarity, the ability to see reality without the distortions of defensive belief. And that clarity made him one of the most important thinkers in human history. Here's what happens when you actually implement this consistently. You start to see reality in layers. Surface layer is what everyone believes. Shared narratives, accepted wisdom, consensus reality. Most people live entirely on this layer. They believe what they're told to believe, accept what they're supposed to accept, never question deeper. But when you treat everything as hypothesis and actively test, you see beneath surface layer. You see the evidence that supports or contradicts consensus. You see the interests served by certain beliefs being widely held. You see the mechanisms through which beliefs are installed and maintained. You see complexity where others see simplicity. You see nuance where others see certainty. You see reality more accurately because you're not filtering it through defensive protection of pre-existing beliefs. This creates a strange experience. You're surrounded by people who believe things you can see are false or oversimplified. They speak with certainty about things they've never actually examined. They defend positions based on emotion and tribal loyalty rather than evidence. And you can't tell them what you see because they're not ready to question. Their entire worldview depends on not questioning, so you stay quiet. You see what they don't. And you learn to navigate a world where most people are operating on false or incomplete understanding. Bacon experienced this constantly. He understood things about nature and knowledge that his contemporaries didn't. But he couldn't just announce it. He had to write carefully, build support strategically, demonstrate his method's utility, gradually convince others to question what they'd always accepted. It took decades, and even then, many never understood what he was actually doing. They thought he was just offering new theories. They didn't realize he was fundamentally changing how humans think. Now let's talk about the practical applications. How does this technique make you more effective in actual life? Beyond just seeing reality more clearly, how does it translate to better outcomes? First, decision-making improves dramatically. Most people make decisions based on beliefs they've never examined. They do what they've always done, what their tribe does, what feels right based on unquestioned assumptions. But if you're treating your own strategic beliefs as hypotheses, you can actually evaluate whether they're serving you, whether they're based on accurate understanding of reality, whether they need updating. This means you can adapt. When circumstances change, when new information arrives, when old strategies stop working, you can update. You're not locked into approaches because that's how we've always done it, or that's what I believe works. You can test, experiment, learn from results, continuously improve. This gives you massive advantages over people stuck in unexamined belief patterns. Second, you avoid costly mistakes. Many people make huge mistakes because they believe things that aren't true. They invest in schemes that can't work because they believe economic myths. They stay in bad relationships because they believe relationship myths. They pursue career paths because they believe success myths. If you're actively testing your beliefs about these domains, if you're willing to recognize when you're wrong, you avoid the catastrophic mistakes that come from acting on false beliefs you've never questioned. Third, you can actually learn from others. Most people can't learn from people they disagree with because disagreement triggers defense. But if you treat your beliefs as hypotheses, disagreement is interesting rather than threatening. Someone who thinks differently than you might have information you don't, might see things you've missed, might be right where you're wrong, so you can actually listen, actually consider, actually learn. This means you can extract value from every interaction rather than just from interactions with people who already agree with you. Fourth, you become much harder to manipulate in business, relationships, politics, everything. People try to control you through appealing to unexamined beliefs all the time. Buy this because successful people buy it. Vote this way because good people vote this way. Believe this because smart people believe it. These appeals work on most people because they're not examining the underlying beliefs being triggered. But if you examine everything, you see through these manipulations instantly. Let me give you the implementation framework, the practical steps for actually making this shift, because theory isn't enough. You need process. Every day, identify one belief you hold strongly. Write it down. Then write down what would prove it false. Then spend time that day looking for that evidence. Actively seeking information that would challenge your belief. Not to prove yourself wrong necessarily, but to test whether your belief can withstand serious challenge. Do this daily. One belief examined per day. In a year, you've deeply examined 365 beliefs. That's transformative. When you encounter new information that contradicts existing beliefs, instead of immediately defending or dismissing, pause. Notice your defensive reaction. Then ask, what if this is true? What would that mean? What evidence would I need to see to change my mind? Hold the question open for a while. Let yourself sit with the discomfort of uncertainty. Then evaluate based on evidence rather than defensive emotion. Regularly expose yourself to smart people who disagree with you. Not to argue. To understand. What do they see that you're missing? What's the best case for their position? What are the weakest points in your position? This is uncomfortable, but it's how you test whether your beliefs are actually justified or just tribal markers you're defending. Keep a belief journal. Track your beliefs over time. Note when you change your mind and why. This serves multiple purposes. It makes you conscious of your beliefs rather than just unconsciously defending them. It helps you notice patterns in what makes you change your mind, and it provides evidence that you can change your mind, which makes future changes less threatening to your identity. Practice saying, "I don't know," and "I was wrong." These phrases are incredibly powerful. Most people can't say them, can't admit uncertainty or error. But if you practice, if you get comfortable with them, they become tools for freedom. "I don't know" means you don't have to defend false certainty. "I was wrong" means you can update when you get new information. Both make you smarter because they free you from defending untenable positions. Now here's what you'll experience as you do this. Initially, anxiety. Because certainty feels safe and uncertainty feels dangerous. Your brain will resist, will try to get back to comfortable certainty. You have to push through this. Tolerate the discomfort. Remind yourself that false certainty is more dangerous than honest uncertainty because false certainty leads to bad decisions you're confident about. Then, isolation. As you start seeing through things others accept, as you question things your tribe holds sacred, people will sense you're different. They might push you away, might get uncomfortable around you, might accuse you of overthinking or being negative or not being a team player. This is painful. But it's the cost of seeing clearly. You can't have clarity and comfortable belonging. You have to choose. Then, clarity. As you persist, as the technique becomes habitual, you start seeing reality more accurately than you ever have. Patterns emerge. Contradictions become obvious. Manipulations become visible. You understand what's actually happening beneath surface narratives, and this clarity, while sometimes uncomfortable, is intoxicating. You're finally seeing, finally thinking, finally using your intelligence for its actual purpose, and finally freedom. Because once you're evaluating everything, once nothing is sacred, once you're not defending any position as identity, no one can control you through normal means. They can't manipulate you through your beliefs because you don't hold beliefs defensively. They can't trigger emotional reactions that bypass your reasoning because you recognize emotions as information, not arguments. They can't use authority or social proof because you evaluate claims independently. You're free in ways most people never experience. Free to think, free to question, free to change your mind, free to see reality rather than comfortable illusions. This is what Francis Bacon discovered. This is what made him impossible to control. This is what allowed him to revolutionize human thought, not superior intelligence, not special education, just willingness to treat his own beliefs as hypotheses rather than truths, to question everything, including and especially what he was most certain about, to test rather than defend, to seek truth rather than protect comfort. The brain hack is simple, but using it consistently is hard, because it requires giving up comfort, certainty, tribal belonging, and identity based on belief. Most people won't pay that price. They'll stay in defense mode, keep accepting what they're told, keep believing what their tribe believes, keep defending positions they've never examined, and they'll remain controllable, manipulable, operating far below their cognitive potential. But you don't have to. You can make the shift. You can start treating beliefs as hypotheses. You can begin questioning everything. You can develop clarity that makes you exponentially smarter and impossible to control through normal means. It's available. It's simple. It's powerful. The only question is whether you're willing to pay the cost of using it. Francis Bacon paid that cost. He became one of history's most important thinkers because of it. He saw what others couldn't see, thought what others couldn't think, and changed how humanity understands reality, all from one simple shift, from defending beliefs to testing hypotheses, from protecting comfort to seeking truth, from being controlled to being free. The technique is yours. The choice is yours. Stay in defense mode and remain controllable, or shift to evaluation mode and become impossible to manipulate. Get exponentially smarter not by learning more, but by finally using your intelligence for thinking rather than defending. See reality clearly instead of through filters of unexamined belief. That's the brain hack. That's what makes you 10 times smarter and impossible to control. Not magic, not mysticism. Just honest, consistent, rigorous testing of everything you believe, including and especially what you're most certain about. Because what you're most certain about is probably what you've examined least. And examining it, testing it, being willing to be wrong about it, that's where transformation happens. Francis Bacon found freedom this way, found clarity, found power that no one could take from him because it came from his own rigorous thinking rather than accepted beliefs. And that same freedom, that same clarity, that same power, it's available to anyone willing to make the shift. To stop defending and start evaluating, to treat beliefs as hypotheses and test them honestly, to pay the cost of seeing reality as it actually is rather than how we wish it were or how we've been told it is. The question is whether you're ready, whether you're willing, whether you want to be smarter and free more than you want to be comfortable and controlled, because you can't have both. And making the choice determines everything about how you'll think, see, and understand for the rest of your life.